Hi everyone, I am Dr. Kim Perretto. I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, licensed acupuncturist and hypnotherapist. And today I'm talking about wellness beyond boundaries, navigating alternative healthcare spaces in times of crisis. And I want to begin by sharing with you a story. Now, all of the details of the story have been changed to protect the patient's identity, and trigger warning for detailed graphic medical information. So I'm going to tell you a story about Marie. Marie booked a new patient appointment with me, and on her form said she was coming in for a sprained ankle. Sprained ankle is a pretty typical complaint. I'm an acupuncturist. We see those all the time. She walked into the appointment, or rather hobbled into the appointment, on an ankle that was the size of a basketball. I have never seen or even heard of anything like this. This photo doesn't even do it justice. She hobbles in, and I quickly realize, well, that's definitely not a sprained ankle. Something else is at play here. We sit down, we have our intake, ask her how it started, how long it's been going on for, what's it feel like, all of those questions. And then we get to the question I'm most interested in the answer of, and that is, what's your medical diagnosis? What did your doctor have to say about this? And Marie gives me an answer that I hear far too often for my personal preference. And that's that she doesn't trust Western medicine. She's not going to the doctor. She hasn't been to the doctor, and she refuses that idea entirely. It's not happening. Doctors are crooks. Big Pharma is out to take all of your money, and she does not trust Western medicine. She also informs me that she believes that this problem to be spiritual in nature, meaning that she has something to spiritually learn out of this disease process, and that by healing spiritually, she will heal her ankle as well, which is why she's seeking out complementary alternative medicine. Now, some of my colleagues would fire a patient like this. They would tell them, you need to leave my office, you need to go to the emergency room, that's how serious this is. And that is how serious this was. But I know this type of patient, and I know that she's not going to believe my advice. She's going to leave, and she's going to find another practitioner who believes her as well, who agrees with her, who takes this stance, and she's going to put off getting that care. But I know that after a few sessions of working together, I probably have a pretty good chance of garnering her trust and getting her to actually go to that medical appointment, which is exactly what we did. I didn't go for treating that ankle or getting a miracle cure. I went for treating the person and helping her feel more okay with the possibility that medical treatment, medical advice could be helpful for her. Even the reframe of understanding that even a medical treatment or a surgery or a medication can actually be a spiritual experience. She left my care to do some traveling, but kept in touch and found out that she did go to a medical doctor, probably a few weeks after we had worked together. The first doctor told her that they thought it was cancer, and she walked out of the appointment. The second doctor, so she actually got a second opinion, and this person told her they did some scans. They said we couldn't even see her bone, and that we wanted to do an exploratory surgery, which she refused. So she informed me of all of this, and that now her search is to the entire world. That she's looking throughout the whole world. She will travel anywhere in the world to find a healer that can help her spiritually, alternatively. And eventually she found that person. It was somebody in Florida, and they had studied with a guru in India. Quickly, her case ran through the pipeline up to the guru in India, and she was working with that person. He prescribed herbs to her. Now, her ankle was so swollen that the skin was really tight and there were sores all over it. The herbs were diuretic in nature, and they actually were able to get the swelling to come down by way of oozing out of these sores, to the tune of filling a garbage bag a day. A few weeks later, Marie died. She was dehydrated and losing too much fluid because of this treatment. Essentially, it worked too well. But she wasn't under medical care, and she wasn't under consistent care because this person was not anywhere near her vicinity. Jessica came to my office on a Tuesday in tears. Sort of angry tears, but tears. She had gotten a bladder infection over the weekend and was causing bleeding, so she went to urgent care and got antibiotics. That morning, she had spoken with her naturopathic doctor, who yelled at her, who told her she was ruining her health setting herself back years of progress by taking those antibiotics. He could have cured her with vaginal ozone treatment. These cases happen more often than I would like them to, and they have significant consequences. Medical misinformation, medical disinformation, and providers who operate with that misinformation are very, very much harming patients. These types of indoctrinated patients suffer severe consequences. Their diseases progress. We go from stage 1 cancer to stage 4 because somebody said they could cure you with herbal medicine. We have incomplete healing because patients abandon medical treatments. We have diseases that spread within the body and to other people, as we saw significantly with the COVID-19 pandemic. We have new symptoms and diseases that arise out of very rigid and polarized protocols that people do, like eating disorders. When people eliminate too many foods, becomes disordered eating. And of course, loss of life. These are all the significant consequences that happen as a result of medical misinformation and disinformation, particularly from those operating in the complementary and alternative medicine space, or CAM space. So I'm Dr. Kim Pirano. I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, licensed acupuncturist, California National Board certified. I'm an integrated medical hypnotherapist. I've been in practice since 2010. I work with a lot of patients in person for acupuncture and online for coaching and hypnotherapy. And I work with a lot of people who suffer with chronic and terminal illnesses. So we have chronic pain, chronic illness, hospice care, palliative care, things like that. My kind of framework for healing is that healing doesn't require us to get better. We can actually change our mindset. We can change our experience of symptoms to have a better quality of life. And this is really important because not all times we can be cured, right? Sometimes a chronic disease we will have forever, and sometimes a disease will be the last disease we have. It's very empowering for people to understand that there's still possibilities for change, even if the thing doesn't go away. And that's the vantage point that I take when working with clients. I'm also a survivor of a New Age spiritual cult. This cult was very heavily influenced, if not plagiarized, Scientology practices and ideas. And it was in my deconstruction from that group and learning more about cults and coercive control that I started to see this overlay between wellness and what we all know about cult survivors and how that looks and how it portrays and the damage and the harm that it caused and what cults really look like through those different frameworks. So where does medical advice end and coercive control begin? I actually wrote an article with this title for the publication called Acupuncture Today, and I got a lot of hate mail for it. I took that as a sign that I was doing my job correctly. We talked about black and white thinking, all or nothing mentalities, and how that actually can harm patients, and how it actually is coercive control because of the power dynamic that's set up from the very beginning. So I want us to start to reframe this type of medical misinformation and disinformation because I feel like those words have really lost their luster, right? It doesn't mean what it used to. And reframe this as coercive control, mind control, because that's really what it actually is. So why do people seek out complementary and alternative medicine? There's actually some studies that have been done on this. So this one from JAMA publication, Why Patients Use Alternative Medicine. And some of the key factors they found were that people had poorer health status. So when nobody's helping you and everything is not working the way you want it to, we seek out other methods. People who had more education sought out alternative methods. People who had a personal classification within a cultural group. So this is environmentalism, feminism, spirituality, personal growth, and psychology. So that interest or identification with those classifications. People who had very specific health problems like anxiety, back problems, chronic pain, and urinary tract issues. People who just generally had a holistic orientation, and people that had a life experience that actually changed their worldview. Only 4.4% of people primarily relied on CAM methods. So these are the people who only use those or don't use Western medicine. 34% of US citizens have used CAM therapies within the past year, and 60% of physicians have actually recommended CAM therapy. So this is popular and growing in popularity treatments that we have available. There were 3 theories proposed as to why and to explain the use of alternative medicine. First was dissatisfaction, and I'm in the United States, and our healthcare system leaves a lot to be desired. We are the only developed nation where people go bankrupt for spraining their ankle because of medical bills. Systems are overrun, doctors are overworked, there's a lot of shortages of staffs, and people aren't getting the care that they need, the care that they want, and the care that they desire. So people have experienced ineffective care, had adverse effects from their care, seen it as too impersonal or not really getting what they wanted. The next was a need for personal control. These people seek therapy is because they see them as less authoritarian. So when we go to a medical doctor, we see that they tell us what to do. They don't really listen to us. So they want control of their care plan, which is part of the focus of patient-centered care, but not every institution functions that way. And then a philosophical congruence. They believe in this type of medicine. They've had experience with it that worked that way. It aligns with their values, their spirituality, and their worldview. So is wellness a cult? We could make a case for it, which I plan to talk about today. When we look at the health and wellness industry through the lens of coercive control, and it gives us an entirely new, stark view of the harm that can be caused here. And I believe it's usually well-meaning but very ill-informed practitioners who are the culprits of this. So while there isn't a leader at the top, it still functions in that way. So how do we recognize them? How do we keep ourselves safe? And what do we do about it? So today I want to talk about how we can understand wellness through the lens of coercive control using Robert J. Lifton's 8 criteria for thought reform. And then how can we recognize people who are potentially harmful practitioners before we really get involved with them? I use the mnemonic CULT to help people understand what this looks like. And then navigating it. How can we navigate healthcare with our integrity and dignity intact? What do we do when we see those harmful practitioners? So how do we affect change within this system that is pretty flawed? So let's jump in. First, I want to talk about levels of education. So with complementary alternative medicine, there's a gradation of practitioners that function in this arena. First, we have unlicensed and untrained people. These are your influencers. Some, things like coaches, nutritionists even, like there's no requirement or governing board for those things. There's obviously different levels of training that can exist, but they don't have to. So people can slap names on themselves without really having the education and practice to back it up. So we have unlicensed and untrained people. These practitioners and influencers use anecdotes, personal stories to garner that emotional interest in you. They have little to no training. They're often selling programs and ideas that can be very biased, and they're often really unsupported by evidence-based practices. Then we have unlicensed but trained people. So this is a category that is a really gray area where people who function as health coaches, as nutritionists, can be very educated and very good at their jobs. Personal trainers, I don't believe are licensed by a governing board, but they are trained, right? So we have coaches, mentors, influencers who've completed training, certifications, but they're still in a realm of discipline that's not governed by a board, by a licensing board, by the government. So these people can also fly under the radar. And then we have licensed and trained professionals. These are your acupuncturists, your doctors of osteopathic medicine, your MDs, your NDs, chiropractors, physical therapists. All of these disciplines, at least in the United States and most states, have governing boards that license them. So there's a test, there's a standard for school that needs to take place. And while there are all of those checks and balances at play, these people will have the most authority in this space because of those things. And they may also have very vague scopes of practice. One of the things that was intriguing to me as an acupuncturist was that we have a really broad scope of practice. And some things that people practice, like functional medicine, isn't governed by any particular board. It's not a medical practice, so anyone can practice it. So these are things we need to be aware of. It's just like, what are the levels of education, levels of licensure? How does that even function? How do we pick people out based on those things? And I think it's good to not necessarily reject anyone just based off of credentials alone, but we need to look at the whole picture. So now I want to jump into the 8 criteria for thought reform and how they apply to the health and wellness space. First, we have milieu control. This is control of behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions. Stephen Hassan's BITE model really goes into this, how all of these things are controlled. We have really blurred lines here between clinical/medical advice and personal biases and beliefs. And what we need to remember is that when you're hiring a healthcare professional, whether they are just a coach or whether they're a licensed MD, you are in a position of power and balance. So that person has a lot of influence over what you're going to think, what you're going to do, how you're going to operate within that space. Some practitioners will require that people only see them. So if you're going to go do a program with Dr. M, for instance, that's not a real person, he requires that you only see him and you're not allowed to see any practitioners during that time frame. That to me is a big red flag. We have a lot of us versus them mentality that falls into play here. Big pharma is evil. Modern medicine just wants your money. Natural medicine is so much better. Modern medicine is a low vibration. Herbal medicine, plant medicine is a high vibration. These polarizing black and white viewpoints. And then we have these, where do we get our information from? Only these people are truthful. Right? We only listen to this podcast. We only listen to the medical medium books, whatever it is. So we have these very pinpointed and all or nothing, black and white. This is what's allowable. This is what's not. And it's usually coming from how that practitioner talks to the patients. Mystical manipulation, I think, shows up really strongly here. And these are the magical stories of healing, right? Usually fabricated, people who have cured their cancer with alternative medicine, but in reality, they actually did take first-line cancer therapies. They did take chemotherapy, and they did go through those treatments, but they're writing a book about how alternative medicine, diets, etc. cured them. Pseudoscientific research that supports claims. I did it, so can you, is something we hear a lot, especially in the influencer social media spaces. This anecdotal evidence versus true evidence-based practices and treatments. Just because somebody did it doesn't mean you can. Just because someone's body looks this way doesn't mean yours will. And so there's this mystical manipulation that really takes place. And as people get more educated in a sense, we see more scientific sounding language that shows up as well that really gives the illusion of that legitimacy. Demand for purity is a big one that we see. And this is where, this is a gradation, of course. Some people are like, oh, we believe in X, Y, and Z, but we also believe in this. And other people, it's very pigeonholed into a very small container of what's acceptable. So demand for purity requirements, this requirement of a very strict adherence to cleanses, to regimens, to protocols, to even that belief system. We're rejecting everything that's outside of it. We reject allopathic medicine in favor of these natural alternatives. There's often this kind of core desire to cleanse and purify the body, which I think stems from really religious undertones. And this black and white thinking, right? All medicine is bad and evil, surgery isn't necessary, chemo, vaccines, etc. are killing patients and don't heal them. Getting put on a ventilator kills you. There's so many things that show up here where we're trying to do it all ourselves to be that soul individualist with that body as a temple. So this demand for purity comes into play here. This is this patient I told you about where the practitioner actually yelled at them for taking a medicine because the demand for purity was so strong. Confession shows up more discreetly. And this can be a requirement, right, to tell the practitioner when you've sinned, when you've gone off course, when you've gone off the diet, when you've used a different modality instead. Perhaps that practitioner might threaten with the idea of being fired as a patient if you're not adhering to this perfectly. Sometimes there's confession over social media, where we see people more in the realm of just sort of talking about what their experience is and what they've been doing. This need to cleanse and purge past medical treatment with new alternative methods is something that's really interesting as well. So we took antibiotics as a child, and now we're still doing treatments as a 40-year-old adult to try to cure what happened when you were 5 years old, when your body is literally no longer the same. Sacred science, of course, shows up here. This is the method, protocol, healer are unquestionable and regarded as that ultimate truth. Those people who question this, who cast any air of doubt, are shamed, cast out, ridiculed, canceled on social media, or attempted to. This includes other healthcare providers who are more experienced and educated. They're seen as like hostile antagonists to the movement. And we see this, I see this a lot on my social media, how it's sort of curated as I get a lot of registered dietitians. And the types of influencers that are operating in the polarized places will have a lot of beef with those dietitians, because the dietitians are coming from that very evidence-informed space and mindset, and the people who are capitalizing on people not understanding that are, they're kind of butting heads against each other. So we see this, like people who actually do have the licensure and the training are cast out as being uneducated, when in fact they're very educated. Loading the language is always the clearest criteria for me. We have quantum healing, candida overgrowth. We have disease names that are made up essentially, although some of them aren't, right? Candida overgrowth can actually be a thing, but it looks very differently in a medical picture as opposed to an alternative medical picture. Don't eat anything your body that you can't pronounce. Alkalize your body, which would actually kill you if we could actually do that. Specific language is attributed to alternative medicine spaces that may not be inherently false or negative, right? It's sort of this very wishy gray area, but there's absolutely that very specific language, that tone of language that comes to describe all of this. Doctrine over person is one of the more harmful, and dispensing of existence are one of the more harmful ways that this affects people. So our personal experience, our legitimate fear, right? If we're coming in, we're going, I am afraid of doing chemotherapy because it might be uncomfortable, it might be really difficult, but I'm also afraid of dying from cancer, right? So this wavering of commitment are seen as unacceptable. Like, you don't let fear rule you, is something that people often say. So we have to stay true to that treatment, to the path. We have to be unwavering with that commitment, and we're not allowed to doubt it. Patients may doubt the healer or professional, can be really gaslit and dismissed. That's just your fear talking. That's not a real concern that you might have. And we just, and they're shut down and cast aside. Those doubts are those questions are rarely ever answered. They're really rejected. And it's this way or no way, right? My way or the highway type of mentality. Going back to conventional medicine is like the ultimate sin here, and practitioners may even discontinue care for doing so. So if you're seeing this alternative practitioner and you do decide, I'm actually going to go do first line medical therapy instead, they're going to fire you for doing that. Dispensing of existence ties hand in hand here, and this is that elitist all or nothing mentality, right? This permeates this space really deeply. All outside evidence, all outside practitioners, guidelines, etc. are seen as contradictory to the beliefs and practices of the practitioner or ideology, and those things are very rejected. So no one who operates outside of this ideology is legitimate. They're all quacks. They're all crooks. They're all out to rob you. So that's that all neurologists are crooks. Nobody's here to actually help you. They have this alternative agenda. So when it comes to recognizing red flags, I use this mnemonic cult. And I think this is a really easy way to see these beginning signs, because this The 8 criteria of thought reform are a great way to understand this whole paradigm, but we usually only notice that once we're really deep in it. Once you've already spent the $4,000 on lab work, right? We've already been in it, we're already deep in it, and it's when we leave that we can look back through that framework to understand what was at play there. How was that actually hijacking your ability to make authoritative decisions in your life? So what I like to work with people on is, how do we recognize this early? How do we recognize it? How do we shift it? How do we not fall for it so much? And this mnemonic of cult are these 4 signs that I see more recognizable in those early stages. So we have C for charisma, U for uniqueness, L for love bombing, and T for time pressure. And with charisma, I like to lump in confidence and certainty. And this is always in a subject where certainty isn't possible. I think this is why cults really show up in religious and spiritual spaces, because those leaders are capitalizing with a confidence of certainty about a subject that is inherently uncertain, right? We don't know what happens when we die. We don't know how to get off the wheel of karma, or if that even really exists. And so those people are able to really capitalize on that space by manipulating that need, that questioning for certainty that we have. In the healthcare space, this shows up, in these patients who have these poorer diagnosis, this poorer health picture, where they're really suffering and they're not getting the care that they want. They're not getting the diagnosis they need. They're not getting the treatment they need. They're looking for anything and everything. So somebody comes along, they have a story that sounds just like yours, and they say, this worked for me. This is how I know this is going to work for you. And that is really soothing. It's really easy to kind of grab onto. So we have that charisma, that certainty, that confidence about something that's really uncertain. This is why, there's no evidence to back a lot of this stuff up. And some of the evidence that does exist is just not there yet. Medicine is always a little bit behind what people actually need, right? Back in, probably not even 50 years ago, we called a lot of women's issues hysteria. Now we have different diagnoses and understandings of them. So it's no surprise that people are wanting to go into alternative spaces to get relief of what's happening for them. But this is also this perfect pool of a customer base that will glob onto it. That's where we get really suckered into things. Then we have uniqueness, and this is the uniqueness of the person, of the group, of the protocol, of the method, right? This way is more effective, it's better, it's special, it's unique. I have this special training, we do this quantum healing, whatever it is. That uniqueness of the person, and that's a selling point for this program. You're not going to get it anywhere else because this person is so unique. You're not going to get it anywhere else because this person had the same experience as you. And then we have love bombing. And love bombing is really interesting. In the cult that I was in, love bombing did not happen in the traditional sense of like, oh, we love you, we're so glad you're here. But it happened in the sense of, you're so special and unique that you found this place in the first place, right? You need this special thing we have, and you are the perfect type of person to have it. So you're so enlightened for seeing the truth about medical realities, right? Love bombing, I want to pull back from thinking, oh, it's just somebody being like, oh, we're so happy you're here and you're so special, to how that makes you feel. So love bombing makes you feel unique. It makes you feel special. It makes you feel chosen. So we have the uniqueness of the group, that's a selling point for the group, and how they make you feel, which is also unique. I found this secret method, right? This special thing that nobody else has. That makes me feel special. And then, of course, time pressure. So to work with us, you have to sign up now. Maybe you're getting a big deal by signing up sooner than later. You're on borrowed time with treating this, right? You've had candida overgrowth your entire life. The longer you let it sit, the worse it's going to become. So there's a lot of time pressure that goes into pushing this ideology. So what do we do with that cult mnemonic, because sometimes we recognize it, but oftentimes we don't, because all of those things elicit a very strong emotional response. They elicit a very strong emotional response that's capitalizing on our fear, on our anxiety, but mostly on our excitement. When we meet somebody who makes us feel that way, we're excited. And if you had the experience of being in a cult as well, for me, it was super exciting. That beginning stage, it was like, I found the thing that's going to change my whole life. That's the feeling that we need to actually start to tag as a red flag. So practitioners operating through coercive control tactics draw out those feelings. Their feelings and activations in their clients and potential clients and followers. You feel excited. You feel motivated. You have some flavor of fear, right? That we might miss out. We might not have the chance. Or the implanted fear, that dangers of modern medicine. There might be confusion, panic, anxiety, excitement, fear, terror, all of these really activated emotional states that are popping up for us. And we want to start to tag that as a red flag. In some of my coaching clients, I use this in the realm of dating. I think it's really easy to understand it in this realm. The people who make you really excited, get the butterflies in your stomach, that new relationship energy, that limerence feeling is actually a red flag because it's you being really activated. What we want to seek out with potential partners and potential practitioners is someone who makes us feel calm, someone who makes us feel settled and in our body, someone who helps us feel like we have control of our protocol, who actually speaks to us like a human, and hears us for what it's all worth. So these are the things we really want to pay attention to. We want to start to flag them as red flags or caution flags, right? All of those charisma, uniqueness, the love bombing, making you feel special, time pressure aren't necessarily problematic in and of themselves. But put together in any extreme version, they can be like really significant warning signs that this person may be somebody who's not actually operating in my best interest. So I want to encourage you that when you're seeking out a new treatment, a mentor, a guru, a new group, a new class, like whatever it is, we can enjoy that feeling of excitement. We can say, okay, yes, this is making me feel good. I'm really excited about this opportunity, whatever it is. And then I'm going to pause. I'm going to take a minute to pause. I'm going to stop everything. And this is where time pressure comes into play as well. Things that are right for you usually wait around. When people are trying to make you sign up for a program, spend a lot of money in a really quick instance on a 30-minute sales call. These are things we really want to pause at. We want to say, okay, I'm stopping. That sales call is really hijacking our dopamine. It's really manipulating that whole process. So we want to pause. We want to stop. We want to take some breaths. We want to take a day, a week, before we actually commit to this process. So before we start that new diet, before we do the remedy, before we sign up for the program, before we sign on with this coach, pause. Take the time to regulate your system. Take the time to look into this program more deeply. I had one patient whose mother signed them up for a dieting program that was very secretive. They wouldn't tell you anything about what happens in it. Very large group awareness training style of a thing. It turned out to be this very restrictive keto type diet, which was impossible. Take that time. We don't need to sign up for things immediately. Round 2 will come along. And no one really has that miracle cure that's going to work immediately. So we have to take that time to pause, even though it feels like this might be our last ditch effort. We want to let that fear, the excitement pass, bring ourselves back into that regulated state and make our decisions from that space instead. And then finally, what do we do? What do we do when we encounter these people? What do we do when our family members and our friends are falling victim to these types of people? What do we do about it? So combating the cult of wellness can feel like an unsolvable task because it's so diffuse. There's no leader to go to. that will bring the whole thing down. It's going to keep going and it's going to keep growing. And there are definitely, this is what bothers me so much about this, is because there are so many good practitioners out there. There are so many people who are actually helping people in a very ethical, in an integrity way. And when the people who are not operating in that way get a lot of clout and attention and perhaps do harm to patients, it really brings down people's trust in those types of practitioners when there is a lot of help that can happen for patients. So it begins with curiosity. When we're speaking with a loved one, someone we're really worried about being harmed here, you have to be curious. You have to get curious with them. We can't be judgmental. And when we're talking about the practitioner and dealing with them directly, we need to make sure we're holding them accountable and really keeping the bar high. So when we're talking with loved ones, I want you to approach the conversation with curiosity, find out more about what they're looking for, like getting to the root of their desires. What is it you truly want here? Are you looking for a cure? Are you looking for the pain to go away? What's the underlying layers? And let's honor their experience and then guide with compassion. So we can say, okay, I understand you're in a lot of pain here, and it feels good to seek out a treatment. But sometimes there might not be a treatment. Sometimes the treatment's not as good as we want it to be. And so we kind of want to mix that little bit of realism with understanding and that compassion for really seeing that person. I find with my work with patients who are dealing with that chronic pain and illness, when we're working on the coaching hypnotherapy, what we're really working at is their ability to communicate with other people. The ability to have relationships and really enjoy the time that they have with people. So we're looking at that piece because that makes a huge difference, being able to communicate. Sometimes we might need a mentor or a guide or an advocate to come with us to medical appointments, if we do go to medical appointments, so that the doctors actually hear us and don't dismiss us. With providers who have licenses, report them. If we see people doing this, we need to say something. This is absolutely the realm where we need to say something. There was a naturopathic doctor giving homeopathic vaccines in Napa County at the beginning of the pandemic, and she received, I think, federal charges for this. We need to report it. You have to report things. We can look at their governing boards. If you're looking at a practitioner who is licensed, we can look them up, make sure they actually do have that license, and report them. And then amplifying the voices of the people who are doing the good work, right? Who are these ethical practitioners who are sharing valuable insights and information. We want to really amplify those voices. We can, cancel culture comes along and people get canceled on social media. Like, I think that's a double-edged sword. While on one hand, like, people might see them in a different light and it might change minds, I think it more often polarizes even further the divide. And it also really enhances that person's reach, right? When that type of sharing happens in that negative way, it's the all press is good press kind of effect. So we want to amplify the people who are sharing and who are operating ethically, who are those people who we do want to work with. Amplify their voices, share them, get them out, write a review for the person you're seeing who is actually doing really good work with you and keeping you out of this kind of coercive control space. And that pretty much concludes my presentation. I hope that this perhaps shed some light on how we can navigate the alternative health and wellness space, how this affects people, that not just yourself, but others and the whole industry as a whole. I love my work as an acupuncturist and a coach and a hypnotherapist, and it can be very helpful for people. It's not sexy when we're out here giving people realistic expectations for things, but I do believe that patients really appreciate that type of honesty, knowing what we can and cannot do. People often will come in, can you make my pain go away in one treatment? And the answer is always no, probably not, because they hear those mystical manipulation stories, right? Of the one time, that one person who was cured in one session, and they come expecting that result. By sharing all of this information, we help give people better understandings of what is possible. We help them understand what a good practitioner might look like, and gives us some idea of how we can regulate ourselves to keep ourselves safe and to speak to our family members, to speak to our friends, our colleagues, those people who are close to us. If you'd like to stay in contact with me, I would love that. You can learn more about my coaching hypnotherapy practice at couragetotransform.com and my acupuncture practice at lionsheartwellness.com. You can reach me at kim@couragetotransform.com, and then I'm on LinkedIn as well, and like all of the social medias of that Courage to Transform tagline. I appreciate you sticking around for this talk. I appreciate any questions, and I wish you the best of luck navigating that healthcare space. There's a lot of benefit that could come from complementary alternative medicine. I love that we're seeing it more and more exist in hospital systems and institutional medical care systems. And the more we take ourselves seriously, the more we really stand up for this ethical type of practice, the better it is for the patients, and the better it is for all of our health combined.